Previously, Kunle woke up to a life he didn't recognize. A woman calling herself his wife, a past he couldn't remember. But now, as the truth slowly unravels, he's about to learn that some secrets should never be uncovered. Kunle's muscles tensed as the shadow outside the door lengthened. The doorknob turned slowly, sending a jolt of urgency through him. "Tunde," he hissed. "How much longer?" "5 seconds, Tunde whispered back, his fingers flying over the keyboard. The progress bar inched toward completion, agonizingly slow. Daniel moved to the side of the door, his fists clenched, ready to fight if needed. Ada pressed herself against the filing cabinets, fear flashing in her eyes. The door swung open. A security guard stepped in, his hand hovering over the radio on his belt. His eyes locked onto Kunle, then flicked to the glowing computer screen. "Hey, what are you doing?" Daniel struck first. His fist landed squarely on the guard's jaw, sending him stumbling backward. But the man recovered quickly, reaching for his radio. Kunle lunged forward, grabbing the guard's wrist before he could call for backup. They struggled, knocking over a chair as the room filled with grunts and scuffling feet. "Got it," Tunde shouted, yanking the USB from the terminal. "Let's go." Kunle twisted the guard's arm, forcing him to drop the radio. Daniel landed a final blow and the man crumpled to the floor, unconscious. "Move," Daniel barked, already sprinting toward the stairwell. Ada grabbed Kunle's hand and they bolted after him, Tunde close behind. Alarms blared through the building, red lights flashing as security protocols activated. "They know we're here now," Ada panted as they flew down the stairs. Kunle's mind raced. They had the data, but getting out was another battle entirely. As they reached the ground floor, a security team burst into the hallway ahead, blocking their exit. Daniel skidded to a halt. "Back! We need another way out!" Tanji's eyes darted around, spotting a maintenance door down a side corridor. "That way!" Kunle didn't hesitate. They sprinted toward the door, but behind them, the guards were gaining ground. Just as they reached the exit, a voice boomed through the speakers. "You can't run forever, Kunle. We always find you." A chill ran down Kunle's spine. Whoever was behind this wasn't just after his memories. They wanted him erased. For good. Kunle's breath hitched at the voice echoing through the speakers. It was calm, calculated. Someone who had been watching them the entire time. "Who is that?" Ada whispered, gripping his arm tightly. Daniel cursed under his breath. "They know we're in the building. We have seconds before they lock this place down. Move!" Kunle forced his legs to move, shoving the door open and barreling into the dark alley behind the building. Tunde and Eda followed close behind, Daniel covering their escape as shouts erupted from inside the facility. Red lights flared along the perimeter of the Neurocorp compound. The security lockdown had begun. "Where now?" Tunde panted, glancing over his shoulder. "They'll have the entire area locked down soon." Daniel didn't hesitate. "There's a safe house, not far. We get there, regroup and figure out our next move." Kunle's mind raced. They had the data, but now Neurocorp was openly hunting them. Whoever was behind this wasn't afraid of hiding anymore. A gunshot cracked through the air. The bullet struck the brick wall inches from Kunle's head. "Run!" Daniel shouted. They sprinted down the alley, weaving through the maze of industrial buildings. Kunle's lungs burned, his mind screaming for answers, but survival came first. The sound of pursuit faded behind them as they slipped deeper into the city's abandoned sector. After what felt like an eternity, Daniel led them into a run-down building, slamming the rusted door shut behind them. He locked it, breathing heavily. "We're clear, for now." Kunle leaned against the wall, his heart pounding. That voice, they knew me. Daniel nodded grimly. That wasn't just a random security warning. That was personal. Whoever is behind this, they want you gone. Ada reached into her pocket, pulling out the USB drive Tunde had downloaded the files onto. "Then we need to see what's on this, right now." Kunle took the drive, staring at it as a pit formed in his stomach. Whatever was inside would either answer everything or make things even worse. With a deep breath, he plugged the USB into Tunde's laptop. The truth was finally within reach. And he wasn't sure he was ready for it. The room was eerily silent as Kunle plugged the USB drive into Tunde's laptop. The screen flickered, displaying a list of encrypted files under the folder labeled Project Nemesine. Kunle's stomach twisted. This was it. The reason they had erased his memory, the reason they had been hunted. Tunde's fingers danced across the keyboard. I'll decrypt these as fast as I can, but if they have tracking protocols embedded, we might not have long before they find us again. Kunle's pulse pounded. Just do it. We need to know. Ada squeezed his hand. No matter what's on there, we face it together. The first file unlocked. A video feed appeared on the screen. The timestamp read 3 years ago, the day after Kunle and Ada's wedding. The footage showed a dimly lit room, a cold metal table, and a man strapped to a chair. Kunle sucked in a breath. It was him. Ada gasped. Oh my God. On the screen, Kunle looked disoriented, confused. A man in a lab coat stood beside him, speaking in a calm, detached voice. Dr. Philip Ease, the name tag read. Mr. Adeyemi, the doctor said in the recording, you are in a neurocore facility. You recently uncovered classified information that poses a significant risk to our operations. We cannot allow that. Kunle in the video struggled against his restraints. What are you talking about? I don't know anything. Dr. Yes leaned closer. Oh, but you do. You found something you weren't meant to. And now, we're going to make sure you never remember it again. Kunle in the present felt a cold sweat break over his skin. They erased my memory because I found something big. Tunde clicked on another file. More documents flashed on the screen. Classified reports, internal memos, records of human memory modification experiments. They weren't just erasing memories, Tunde muttered. They were testing a new way to control people, manipulate thoughts, rewrite history. And Kunle, you were the one who exposed them. Kunle gritted his teeth. Then we take them down. We expose everything. Daniel exhaled. Easier said than done. They already know we have this. They won't stop until we're eliminated. Ada touched the screen, her fingers trembling. Then we don't wait for them to come to us. We strike first. Kunle's gaze hardened. We end this. Now. Kun's fists clenched as he stared at the screen. The footage confirmed what he had feared. His life had been tampered with, manipulated, erased. But now, he had proof. We need to go public with this, he said, his voice steely with determination. We have to make sure the world sees what Neurocorp is doing. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. It's not that simple. They have resources, power. The moment we expose them, they'll come after us harder than before. We need a plan. Tunde was already typing. I can upload everything to multiple secure locations, news outlets, independent journalists, encrypted forums. But we need to make sure it spreads before they try to shut it down. Ada shook her head. They control the media, the authorities. If we send this the wrong way, it'll disappear before anyone even sees it. We need a bigger platform. Kunle exhaled, thinking. What about a live broadcast, something they can't intercept in time? Daniel's eyes narrowed. That's risky. Once we go live, they'll track us. We'll have a small window before they come for us. Kunle looked at the laptop screen, the damning evidence staring back at him. Then we use that window wisely. Tunde, can you set up a secure live stream? Something that will hit multiple platforms at once. Tunde nodded. Give me an hour. I'll need a strong VPN, multiple proxies and a backup connection in case they try to shut us down. Kunle turned to Daniel. Can you get us somewhere safe to broadcast from? Somewhere they won't expect? Daniel smirked. I have a place, off-grid. We'll have just enough time. Ada squeezed Kunle's hand. Once we do this, there's no going back. Are you sure? Kunle met her gaze, his heart pounding. They stole my life, my memories. If we don't stop them now, they'll do it to others. We end this tonight. Daniel clapped him on the back. Then let's move. Time is running out. As they packed up and prepared for their next move, Kunle couldn't shake the feeling that this was it, the final battle. And no matter what happened next, the truth would finally come out. The safe house was an abandoned radio station on the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with anticipation as Tunde set up the equipment, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The hum of servers and the glow of multiple screens cast eerie shadows on the peeling walls. Kunle paced the room, his heart racing. This was it, the moment they would finally expose NeuroCorp. He glanced at Ada, who sat beside Daniel, double-checking their escape routes. They had minutes before going live, and once they did, there would be no turning back. "Stream is ready," Tunde announced. "Multiple relays are set. The moment we go live, this will hit every major platform. YouTube, news outlets, encrypted networks. If they try to shut it down, the backups will keep pushing the feed." Daniel adjusted his gun holster. "We need to be ready for a fight. The moment they realize what we're doing, they'll send people." Ada swallowed hard but nodded. "We just need enough time to make sure the truth gets out." Kunle took a deep breath and stepped in front of the camera. The red light blinked on. "My name is Kunle Adeyemi," he began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "For the past 3 years, I have been living a lie. My memories were stolen, my life was erased, and the people responsible for it are still out there doing the same to others. Today, I am exposing them. Today, the truth comes out." Tunde pulled up the damning video, the footage of Kunle being interrogated, drugged and erased by NeuroCorp. As the clip played live, a flood of comments exploded onto the screen. People were watching. The world was listening. Then, the lights flickered. A loud crash sounded from outside. "They're here," Daniel growled, pulling his gun. "We have to hold them off until the stream finishes." Kunle turned back to the camera. "They don't want you to know the truth, but it's too late. You know now, and you can't forget." Gunfire erupted outside. The fight had begun. Bullets tore through the walls of the abandoned station, sending shards of wood and debris flying. Colonel ducked behind the broadcast desk, shielding Ada as Daniel returned fire through a broken window. "They're trying to cut the feed," Tunde shouted, frantically typing. "I need another minute to finish the backup relay." Kunle turned to Ada. "Stay low, we need to buy him time." Daniel crouched beside the doorway, gun in hand. "We hold this position as long as we can. They won't stop until they silence us." Kunle grabbed a metal pipe from the floor, his pulse pounding. He wasn't a soldier, but he wasn't going down without a fight. The truth was finally out, and he wouldn't let NeuroCorp erase him again. The door burst open. A black-clad operative charged inside, rifle raised. Kunle reacted on instinct, swinging the pipe with all his strength. It connected with a sickening crack, and the man crumpled to the floor. Another attacker followed, but Daniel fired a single, precise shot, dropping him instantly. "Move," Daniel barked. "They're coming from all sides." Ada pulled out a small knife from her pocket, gripping it tightly. "We're not leaving without Tunde." "I'm almost there," Tunde yelled. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he worked, his fingers flying over the keys. 30 more seconds. Kunle slammed the door shut, barricading it with a chair. He turned to Daniel. "If we can get to the back exit, we might have a chance." Daniel reloaded his gun. "We won't all make it out unless we create a diversion. Someone has to stay behind." Kunlen's stomach dropped. He knew what Daniel was implying. Tunde suddenly gasped. "It's done. The data is uploaded. The whole world is seeing this right now." Ada grabbed Colonel's arm. "Then we run. Now!" Kunle hesitated, looking at Daniel. "What about you?" Daniel gave him a grim smile. "I'll buy you time. Get her out of here." Kunle's heart twisted, but there was no time to argue. He grabbed Ada's hand and bolted toward the back door as the gunfire intensified. As they ran into the night, Kunle heard one last gunshot from inside the station. And then, silence. Kunle's legs burned as he and Ada sprinted through the dark alleyways, their breaths ragged and uneven. The sound of distant sirens echoed through the city, blending with the chaos they had left behind. But Daniel's final gunshot rang the loudest in Kunle's ears, a sound that refused to fade. Ada clung to his arm. "Do you think he—" Kunle shook his head, refusing to finish the thought. "We keep moving. He gave us a chance, and we can't waste it." Tunde's voice crackled through the small earpiece he had given them before they fled. "Kunle, Ada, I'm tracking your movements. You're clear for now, but they'll be searching the city soon. We need to regroup." "Where?" Kunle asked, his pulse still racing. "I have a contact outside town. Safe house in the countryside. We lay low until we figure out our next move. I'll send the coordinates." Kunle exhaled, trying to focus. "Fine. Just tell me the upload worked." Tunde hesitated. "The data went live. People are seeing it. News outlets are picking it up. But Neurocorp is already trying to discredit it, calling it fabricated. They're scrambling, but they're not beaten yet." Kunle gritted his teeth. "Then we make sure they don't recover. We keep pushing until there's nowhere left for them to hide." Ada's grip on his hand tightened. "But first we survive." Kunle nodded. "First, we survive." They disappeared into the night, the weight of Daniel's sacrifice pressing heavy on them. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. And Kunle wasn't going to stop until Neurocorp fell. The countryside safe house was nothing more than a run-down cabin nestled deep in the woods. Kunle and Ada arrived just before dawn, exhaustion weighing down their every step. The crisp morning air did little to calm Kunle's racing thoughts. Tunde was already inside, his laptop open on the wooden table, multiple screens flashing news reports and online discussions about Neurocorp. "You made it?" he said, relief evident in his voice. "For now, at least." Kunle collapsed into a chair, running a hand over his face. "Tell me we're making progress." Tunde exhaled, rubbing his temples. "The footage is still circulating, but Neurocorp is using every resource they have to bury it. They're claiming it's deepfake technology, a coordinated attack against them. Some news outlets are pulling the story, afraid of legal retaliation, but there are others who are fighting back, demanding an investigation. It's turning into a war of information." Ada leaned against the wall, her arms wrapped around herself. "We need something undeniable. Something even they can't refute." Kunle straightened. "What about Dr. Ease? He was the one in the video. If we can find him, he could confirm everything." Tunde frowned. "That's the problem. He's disappeared. No digital footprint, no travel records, nothing. It's like he never existed." Kunle's jaw tightened. "Then we find someone who knows where he is, someone inside Neurocorp who wants out." Ada's eyes widened. "An informant?" Tunde nodded slowly. "It's risky, but if we can get someone to turn on them, we might get what we need." Kunle stood, determination hardening his features. "Then we start searching. We're not done yet." The weight of exhaustion pressed on Kunle, but he forced himself to focus. Finding an informant inside Neurocorp was their only real chance at bringing them down for good. "Where do we even start?" Ada asked, her voice laced with doubt. Tunde's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up encrypted data streams and private communications. "Neurocorp isn't invincible. No organization that powerful operates without internal tension. If we can find someone disgruntled, someone who's seen too much, we might be able to turn them." Kunle rubbed his temples, trying to piece everything together. "Do you have any leads? Someone who might be looking for a way out?" Tunde hesitated, then turned the screen toward them. "There's a name that keeps popping up in leaked correspondence. Dr. Mina Lawson. She was a high-level researcher at Neurocorp, but she vanished from public records 6 months ago. No resignation notice, no termination, just gone." Ada frowned. "Do you think they silenced her?" Kunle's stomach twisted at the thought. "Or she went into hiding. If she's still alive, she could be exactly what we need." Tunde nodded. "I might be able to track her last movements, but if Neurocorp wanted her erased, they've covered their tracks well. Finding her won't be easy. Kunle straightened. Then we start now. She's out there somewhere, and if she has information that can expose them, we have to reach her before they do. Ada's fingers tightened around his. Then let's find her, before it's too late. Kunle sat next to Tunde, watching as lines of code and digital trails scrolled across the screen. The search for Dr. Amina Lawson had begun, but so far every lead was turning up cold. She really did vanish, Tundon muttered, his brows furrowing. No credit card activity, no official records, no communication logs. It's like she erased herself. Ada paced behind them, arms crossed tightly. Or someone erased her. If she knew too much, Neurocorp wouldn't have just let her walk away. Kunle exhaled sharply. She's out there. She has to be. People don't just disappear without leaving something behind. What about family, friends, old colleagues? Tundon nodded, typing furiously. I'll check her known associates. If she's hiding, she might have reached out to someone she trusts. Minutes passed, the only sounds the hum of the computer and the occasional click of keys. Then Tunde froze. Wait, got something. An encrypted email sent to an unknown recipient 2 months ago. The message was short, but it contained one phrase. I know the truth. They won't let me live. Zada's breath hitched. She's running. She knows they're after her. Kunle leaned in. Where was the email sent from? Can we trace it? Tunda nodded. Already on it. The IP address was bounced through multiple servers, but the original signal came from... He paused, eyes widening. A small town about 3 hours from here. If she's still there, she might be hiding in plain sight. Kunle didn't hesitate. Then that's where we go. If Amina Lawson is our key to taking down Neurocorp, we find her before they do. Ada grabbed her bag. Then we leave. Now. The drive to the small town was long and tense. Kunle kept his hands firm on the wheel, his mind racing with possibilities. What if Amina was already gone? What if Neurocorp had reached her first? Ada sat beside him, staring out at the rolling countryside, her fingers tapping nervously against her thigh. Do we even know what we're walking into? If she's running from them, she won't trust strangers. Kunle nodded. We'll have to be careful. We approach her slowly, let her know we're not with Neurocorp. But if she really has answers, we need to convince her to talk. Tunde, hunched in the back seat over his laptop, looked up. I've managed to dig up one more thing before we lose signal. Amina was last seen renting a small cabin on the outskirts of town. No record of her leaving. That's our best lead. Kunle turned onto the main road leading into the town. It was quiet. Too quiet. A single gas station, a handful of houses, and a general store made up most of the area. It was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. Let's split up, Daniel suggested. Kunle and Ada head to the cabin. Tundi and I will ask around, see if anyone's noticed anything strange. If she's still here, someone must have seen her. Kunle pulled the car into a secluded spot near the tree line and turned off the engine. He glanced at Ada. Ready? She exhaled. As I'll ever be. The two of them made their way through the thickening forest toward the location Tundi had found. The cabin came into view, a small weathered structure surrounded by overgrown grass. No movement, no signs of life. Kunle stepped cautiously onto the porch and knocked. Silence. He knocked again. Dr. Amina Lawson, we need to talk. We're not with them, we just want answers. The door creaked open an inch, and a single, wary eye peered through the gap. Go away, I can't help you. Kunlin's pulse quickened. She was alive. Please, he urged. We know what they did to me. We have proof. If you know anything, we need your help to stop them. There was a long pause. Then, slowly, the door opened just wide enough for them to step inside. Kunle and Ada stepped cautiously into the dimly lit cabin. The air was thick with dust, the furniture sparse and worn. Amina Lawson stood near the door, her eyes darting around as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. You shouldn't have come here, she whispered, locking the door behind them. They'll be watching. Kunle took a deep breath. We didn't have a choice. You're the only one who can help us. We know what they did to me, how they erased my memories, and we know you worked for them. Amina's shoulders tensed, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she moved to the small kitchen table and motioned for them to sit. She pulled out a thick, worn notebook and flipped through its pages, stopping at a section filled with complex diagrams and notes scrawled in hurried handwriting. Project Mnemosyne, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That's what they called it. A program designed to suppress and manipulate memories. But it was never meant to be just research. They used it on you, Kunle, because you were getting too close to something. Something even bigger than this. Ada leaned forward. What do you mean? What was Kunle investigating before they erased his past? Amina hesitated, then turned the notebook toward them. A cover-up. NeuroCorp has been running illegal neurological experiments for years. The kind of work that could change everything we know about free will, about identity. You must have found evidence of their most classified project. That's why they wiped you. Kuna's stomach twisted. Do you have proof? Something that can expose them completely? Amina swallowed hard. I have fragments, research notes, leaked reports, but nothing concrete enough to bring them down. If we're going to stop them, we need more. We need someone still on the inside. Kunle exchanged a glance with Ada. Then we find that person, because I'm done running. It's time we take this fight to them. Amina closed her notebook. Then we'd better move fast, because if we don't, they'll find us first. Colonel's mind raced as Amina's words sank in. Someone inside NeuroCorp still had access to the truth. Someone who could give them exactly what they needed to expose everything. But finding that person would be a different battle altogether. Do you have any leads? Kunle asked, his voice tight with urgency. Amina hesitated, flipping through her notebook. There was one person, Dr. Elijah Mbeki. He was a lead researcher on Project Mnemosyne, one of the few who started questioning the ethics of what they were doing. The last I heard, he was still working for them. Probably under close watch. If we can reach him, he might be our way in. Ada frowned. If he's still working there, how do we contact him without exposing ourselves? NeuroCorp is already hunting us. Amina took a deep breath. I know someone who can get a message inside. There's an old scientist, Dr. Uche Okonkwo. He left years ago, but he still has connections within NeuroCorp's underground network. If anyone can get a warning to Elijah without raising suspicion, it's him. Kunle nodded, his determination sharpening. Then we find Dr. Okonkwo and get him to set up a meeting. Where is he? Amina hesitated. That's the tricky part. He's gone off-grid, but I know where he used to hide out, a remote village in the east. If he's still alive, that's where we'll find him. Kunle stood, glancing at Ada and Tunde. Then we head east. We don't have time to waste. If NeuroCorp suspects Elijah might turn, they won't give him a chance. Amina's gaze darkened. Then we have to move fast before they silence him too. The journey east was grueling. Kunle, Ada, Tunde and Amina moved quickly, covering their tracks as they travelled through winding roads and remote villages. Every passing hour felt like borrowed time, a race against whatever move NeuroCorp was making next. Amina had given them the last known location of Dr. Uche Okonkwo, a secluded village nestled deep in the hills. He had disappeared from public life years ago, but if anyone could reach Dr. Elijah Mbeki, it was him. As they approached the village, Kunle couldn't shake the unease settling in his chest. The place was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that spoke of things hidden beneath the surface. A few villagers eyed them curiously as they passed, but no one spoke. Tunde leaned in. Something feels off. Either he's not here anymore or people are too afraid to talk. Kunle nodded. We'll have to do this carefully. Let's split up and ask around. See if anyone has seen him." They moved cautiously, speaking to shopkeepers and elders, but every inquiry about Dr. Okonkwo was met with wary glances and hurried responses. Finally, an old woman pulling a cart of vegetables paused when Kunle mentioned the name. "Dr. Okonkwo," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "If you're looking for him, you'd better be careful. They came asking about him a few weeks ago. Men in dark suits. Not from here? After that, he vanished." Kunle felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Do you know where he went?" The woman hesitated, then motioned toward a narrow path leading up into the hills. "There's an old chapel up there. If he's still alive, that's where he'll be. But be warned. You're not the only ones looking for him." Kunle clenched his fists. They weren't alone. "Then we don't have much time," he said, turning to the others. "Let's move." Kun led the way up the narrow dirt path, his heart pounding as they climbed higher into the mist-covered hills. Every step felt heavier, knowing that time was against them. The chapel lay ahead, its crumbling stone walls barely visible through the thick trees. Ada clutched Kunle's arm. "Do you think he's still there?" Kunle glanced back at the village below, where the old woman had warned them of the men in dark suits. "We'll find out soon enough, but we need to be careful. If they got here before us, this could be a trap." Tundi checked his phone. No signal. "We're on our own." They moved cautiously, their steps muffled by the damp earth. The wind carried the distant sound of rustling leaves, but nothing else. The silence was unsettling. As they approached the chapel's entrance, the door was slightly ajar. Amina raised a hand, signaling them to stop. "Someone's been here recently." Kunle peered inside. The interior was dimly lit by the morning light streaming through shattered stained glass windows. Broken pews lined the hall, and at the far end, an old wooden table stood, covered in scattered papers. Then, a noise. A sharp movement behind one of the pillars. Kunle barely had time to react before a figure lunged out. He instinctively dodged, grabbing the attacker's arm and twisting. The man groaned in pain, struggling against Kunle's grip. "Wait," Amina shouted. "It's him! It's Dr. Okonkwo!" Kunle froze, loosening his hold. The man staggered back, breathing heavily. His hair was streaked with grey, his clothes worn, but his eyes burned with urgency. "You need to leave," Dr. Okonkwo said, his voice hoarse. "They're coming. And if they find you here, none of us will make it out alive." A gunshot cracked in the distance. Tunda cursed. "Too late. They found us." Kunle grabbed Amina's hand. "We're not leaving without you, Doctor. Tell us where Mbeki is." Dr. Okonkwo hesitated only for a second before nodding. "Fine, but we have to run. Now." Kunle didn't need to be told twice. He turned and sprinted out of the chapel, Ada, Tunde, Amina and Dr. Okonkwo close behind. Behind them, shadows moved through the trees. The chase had begun. Kunle's feet pounded against the damp earth as he sprinted downhill, his breath coming in short gasps. The sound of gunfire echoed through the trees, each shot sending a jolt of fear through his body. The men in dark suits were closing in fast. Dr. Okonkwo led the way, moving with surprising agility despite his age. "There's an old supply shed at the riverbank," he shouted. "If we make it there, we might have a chance." Kunle barely had time to process the words before another bullet whizzed past his ear. Ada yelped, ducking low as she clung to his side. Tunda and Amina were close behind, weaving through the thick foliage in a desperate attempt to stay ahead of their pursuers. "Faster!" Kunle urged, his muscles burning from exertion. The trees thinned, revealing the shimmering surface of a fast-moving river below. A rickety wooden shed stood at the edge of the bank, its weathered roof sagging under years of neglect. Dr. Okonkwo skidded to a stop, throwing open the door. "Inside now." They rushed in, the small space barely big enough to fit all 5 of them. The air inside was damp and smelled of rotting wood. Tunde slammed the door shut, shoving an old metal barrel against it. "That won't hold them for long," Ada panted, pressing her back against the wall. Kunle turned to Dr. Okonkwo. "We need to know where Mbeki is, now." The doctor wiped the sweat from his brow. Mbeki was never safe at Neurocorp. He tried to leave months ago, but they took him. I don't know if he's alive, but the last intel I received placed him in a secret facility just outside the capital. If we want to stop them, that's where we have to go. Tunde checked his laptop, his fingers moving swiftly. I can find the location, but we need a way out of here first. Footsteps crunched outside. The men were closing in. Colonel's mind raced. They had come too far to be captured now. He scanned the shed, his eyes landing on a half-broken wooden boat tied to a dock behind the structure. "The river," he said, grabbing Ada's hand. "It's our only chance." Okonkwo hesitated, then nodded. "Then let's move before they find us." Kunle threw open the back door, the group rushing toward the creaking boat as shouts erupted behind them. As they pushed off from the dock, bullets splintered the wooden walls of the shed. They were out of time. The wooden boat rocked violently as the current pulled them forward, the water splashing against its sides. Kunle gripped the edge tightly, his heart pounding as bullets ricocheted off the dock behind them. The men in dark suits stood at the riverbank, their weapons raised, but they weren't shooting anymore. "Why did they stop?" Ada panted, keeping her head low. Tunde glanced back, his brows furrowed. "They're not trying to kill us. They need us alive." Kuna's stomach twisted. That meant Neurocorp still had plans for him. Dr. Okonkwo adjusted his grip on the oar, steering the boat downstream. "We're not safe yet. This river leads to an abandoned logging site a few miles ahead. We can hide there and regroup." Kunle nodded, forcing himself to focus. "Tunde, do you have the facility's coordinates? We need to know exactly where we're going." Tunde wiped the water from his screen, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'm triangulating the last known location of Mbeki. There, east of the capital, inside an old military compound, heavily secured. This won't be easy." Ada shivered beside Kunle, rubbing her arms. "It never is." The boat bobbed along the river, the dense jungle closing in on either side. The adrenaline was wearing off, and exhaustion crept in, but there was no time to rest. If Neurocorp was holding Mbeki, they had to act fast. Okonkwo's voice was grim. "We'll reach the logging site in 20 minutes. After that, we plan our next move. But be ready. Neurocorp won't let us get to Mbeki without a fight." Kunle exhaled, gripping Ada's hand. "Then we fight. No more running." The river carried them forward into the unknown, and with it the final battle loomed ahead. The boat drifted silently onto the shore of the abandoned logging site. The dense jungle canopy above muffled all sound, making their arrival eerily quiet. Kunle jumped out first, his feet sinking into the damp mud as he pulled the boat onto the shore. The others followed, moving cautiously through the thick undergrowth. "We can rest for a few minutes," Dr. Okonkwo said, wiping sweat from his brow. "But not for long. If Neurocorp has tracking drones, they'll be searching the riverbank soon." Kunle nodded, his mind already working through the next step. "Tunde, any updates on the compound?" Tunde pulled out his laptop, crouching under a large tree to avoid glare on the screen. "I managed to pull blueprints before we left. It's an old military facility, but it's been heavily modified. Security is tight. Electrified fences, infrared cameras, and at least 2 armed patrol units moving in shifts. If Mbeki is in there, he's being guarded like a high-value asset." Ada hugged herself, eyes scanning the dark jungle. "So how do we get in? We can't just walk through the front gates." Kunle took a deep breath. "No, but there might be another way. Military compounds always have underground access tunnels, emergency escape routes. If we can find those, we might be able to slip in unnoticed." Dr. Okonkwo straightened. "There is one possibility. Decades ago, the facility was built with an underground water system, an old drainage tunnel that leads into the lower levels. If it's still accessible, that could be our way in." Tunde frowned. "That's a big if. If it's collapsed or flooded, we'll be stuck." Kuhn's jaw tightened. "Then we take the risk. It's our best shot." Ada reached for his hand, squeezing it. "Then we do this together." Kunle met her gaze, nodding. He turned to the others. We leave in an hour. Get what rest you can. After this, there's no turning back. In the distance, the faint sound of helicopters rumbled through the night sky. The hunt was still on. The night was thick with tension as Kunle, Ada, Tunde, Amina and Dr. Okonkwo made their way toward the hidden entrance of the old drainage tunnel. The jungle around them buzzed with nocturnal life, but Kunle could hear something else beneath it. The distant hum of helicopters patrolling the area. "We need to move fast," Tunde whispered. "If they send ground units, we'll have no cover." Kunle nodded, gripping the rusted metal grate that covered the tunnel's entrance. With a grunt, he heaved it open, revealing a dark, musty passage leading underground. A faint trickle of water echoed from below. Okonkwo peered inside. If my memory serves, this should lead us beneath the eastern perimeter of the facility. But we must be careful. These tunnels haven't been maintained in decades. Ada hesitated at the edge. "How do we know it's safe?" "We don't," Kunle admitted. "But it's our only way in." One by one they climbed down, their boots splashing into shallow water. The air was damp and thick, the scent of mold and decay lingering in the confined space. Kun switched on a flashlight, illuminating the narrow tunnel ahead. "Stay close," he murmured, leading the way. They moved in silence, their breaths controlled, their ears tuned for any sound beyond their own movements. The tunnel stretched endlessly before them, with rusted pipes lining the curved walls. After a few minutes, Tunde stopped suddenly. "Hold up. Something's off." Kunle froze, scanning the dim corridor. "What is it?" Tunde pointed at the ground. "This water. It's moving against the natural flow. That means something is being pumped through here." Dr. Okonkwo's expression darkened. That could mean the tunnel is still connected to the facility's internal systems. If that's the case, we might not be alone down here. Amina tensed. "You're saying they could already know we're here?" Kunle tightened his grip on his flashlight. "Let's assume they do. Keep moving, but stay sharp." They pressed forward, deeper into the unknown, the walls closing in around them. The deeper they went, the more Kunle felt the weight of what they were about to face. Whatever lay ahead, there was no turning back now. Kunle's grip tightened on his flashlight as they advanced deeper into the tunnel. The air grew heavier, thick with moisture and the faint scent of rusted metal. The water at their feet rippled slightly. An unsettling reminder that something, or someone, could be nearby. Tunde checked his tracker. "We should be nearing the exit point. If this map is right, the tunnel leads directly to the facility's lower levels. But if they know we're here..." Ada shivered. "Then we're walking straight into a trap." Amina placed a hand on the damp wall, feeling for vibrations. Something's not right. The structure here has been reinforced. This isn't just an old drainage tunnel. They've repurposed it. Dr. Okonkwo nodded. "That explains the water flow Tunde noticed earlier. This tunnel may still be in use, which means security measures could be active." Kunle took a deep breath. "Then we stay quiet and keep moving. No unnecessary noise. If we hear anything, we turn back." They pressed on, their footsteps careful and deliberate. The tunnel narrowed slightly before opening into a wider section where metal walkways ran along both sides. Dim emergency lights flickered above, casting eerie shadows against the damp walls. Then, Kunle saw it. Footprints in the thin layer of sludge covering the ground. Fresh ones. He immediately raised a fist, signaling the others to stop. Ada inhaled sharply, following his gaze. "Someone's been here," she whispered, "recently." Tunde scanned the area, his fingers hovering over his laptop. "I'll see if there are any heat signatures ahead. If there's movement, we'll know." Kunle glanced back at Amina and Dr. Okonkwo. "If we're compromised, we need an exit strategy. Do you know another way out?" Dr. Okonkwo hesitated. "There might be an emergency hatch ahead, but if they've sealed it, we'll be stuck." Kunle exhaled. "Then, let's hope we don't need it." Tunde's screen beeped softly, and his face paled. "We have movement." 50 meters ahead, multiple heat signatures. They're waiting for us. Amina cursed under her breath. It's a trap. Kunle's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered. But turning back meant losing their only chance at reaching Mbeki. We fight smart, he whispered, and we don't get caught. With that, they pressed forward, knowing that whatever was ahead, they had no choice but to face it. Kunle's pulse pounded in his ears as he signaled for everyone to take cover. The tunnel walls were damp and narrow, offering little protection, but they had to use whatever advantage they could find. Ada pressed against the cold stone, gripping Kunle's hand. If they're waiting for us, they already know we're here. Tunde's fingers flew over his laptop. They're not moving, just holding their position. That means one thing. They want us to walk straight into their trap. Amina cursed under her breath. They won't expect us to fight back. If we can disrupt their formation, we might have a chance. Kunle took a deep breath, forcing his mind to focus. We don't have the numbers for a direct fight, but if we can create a distraction, we might be able to break through. Dr. Okonkwo, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke. There's an old maintenance shaft ahead, just before their position. If we can access it, we might be able to move past them unnoticed. Kunle's eyes narrowed. How do you know that? The older man hesitated. I helped design part of this facility's underground network. I know its weaknesses. Tunde scanned the map. He's right. There's an access hatch just 20 meters from where they're positioned. If we can reach it, we can bypass them completely. Kunle nodded. Then that's our way out. But we need a distraction. Ada took a deep breath. I can do it. Give me a flashlight and something loud. I'll draw their attention while you get to the hatch. Kunle's stomach twisted. No, it's too dangerous. She squeezed his hand. We don't have a choice. You need to get to Mbeki. Amina handed Ada a small emergency flare. Once you throw this, move fast. Ada nodded. Kunle pressed his forehead against hers for a brief moment before whispering, Be careful. She gave him a small, determined smile. Always. Kunle turned to the others. We move on my signal. Get ready. With a deep breath, Ada stepped forward and flicked the flare's ignition. The tunnel exploded in red light. Gunfire erupted instantly, echoing off the walls as the enemy forces scrambled to respond. Kunle didn't waste a second. He, Tunde, Amina and Dr. Okonkwo sprinted toward the hatch, knowing that every second counted. Behind them, Ada disappeared into the chaos, her distraction buying them the only chance they had. Kunle's lungs burned as he sprinted through the tunnel, his feet splashing through shallow water. The hatch was just ahead. A rusted metal door built into the tunnel wall. Amina reached it first, yanking at the handle with all her strength. It's stuck, she gasped. Tunde, still clutching his laptop, shoved it into Kunle's hands and joined Amina. Together they pulled with everything they had. The metal groaned in protest before finally giving way with a loud creak. Kunle turned back, searching for any sign of Ada. His chest tightened. The gunfire behind them had died down, but the tunnel still glowed red from the flare. She's coming, Dr. Okonkwo assured him. We need to go now. Kunle hesitated for half a second longer, then forced himself through the hatch. The air inside was thick and stale, the narrow passage barely wide enough for them to move single file. Amina led the way, with Kunle and Dr. Okonkwo in the middle, while Tunde closed the hatch behind them. This should lead us to the storage levels beneath the facility, Amina whispered, checking the map she had memorized. If Mbeki is here, this is where they'll be keeping him. Kunle nodded, his mind racing. Ada had done her part. Now he had to do his. They moved quickly, their footsteps barely making a sound in the confined space. The further they went, the colder the air became. Then, suddenly, Amina stopped short, holding up a hand. What is it? Kunle whispered. Amina turned, her expression grim. There's a security checkpoint just ahead. If we trigger any alarms, we won't make it out alive. Tunde exhaled sharply. Then let's hope I can override their systems. Kunle clenched his fists. They were so close. One wrong move and everything would fall apart. Tunde crouched beside the security panel, his fingers moving swiftly over the keys of his portable device. The glowing red scanner above the door cast an ominous hue over their tense faces. I need a minute, he whispered, sweat beading on his forehead. Their encryption is tougher than I expected. Kunle kept his eyes on the dimly lit hallway ahead. The facility was too quiet. It made his skin crawl. We don't have a minute. Tunde, work faster. Amina knelt beside him, glancing nervously back the way they had come. There's no telling if Ada got out safely. We have to move before they realize we're inside. Dr. Okonkwo exhaled sharply. If this checkpoint has biometric locks, we may need an alternate route. I remember these systems. They require high-level clearance. Tunde smirked. Or a skilled hacker. A tense silence followed as he worked. Then, a soft beep echoed through the tunnel, and the security light turned green. We're in, Tunde whispered triumphantly. Kunle wasted no time, pushing the door open and motioning for the others to follow. The corridor beyond was stark, sterile, the walls lined with reinforced glass panels. Behind some of them were empty holding cells, others filled with high-tech equipment. This looks like a research wing, Amina murmured, scanning the room. If Mbeki's here, he'll be heavily guarded. Kunle nodded, determination hardening his gaze. Then we find him, quickly. They moved forward cautiously, every shadow feeling like a threat. The deeper they went, the closer they came to the truth, and the danger waiting for them in the dark. Kunle led the group deeper into the research wing, his pulse steady but his nerves on edge. The eerie glow of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows along the metallic walls. Every step they took echoed slightly, a reminder of how exposed they were. Amina stopped suddenly, her eyes scanning the numbered doors. If they're keeping Mbeki here, he won't be in an open cell. He's too valuable. They'd have him in a classified lab or deep station containment. Tunde was already working, tapping furiously on his device. Give me a second. His brows furrowed in concentration. Got it. There's a restricted access area at the end of this corridor. Security logs show unusual activity there within the last few hours. Kunle exchanged a glance with Ada, who had just caught up with them after her daring distraction. Her breathing was still laboured, but her resolve was unwavering. Then, that's where we go. They moved swiftly but cautiously, bypassing empty cells and darkened labs until they reached a reinforced steel door marked Restricted Access. Level 5, clearance required. This is it, Amina whispered. Tunde plugged into the control panel, sweat forming at his temple. This system is more advanced. It's going to take longer. Kunle turned to Ada and Dr. Okonkwo. Be ready. If they realize we're in, they'll come for us. Amina drew a small handgun from her bag. They already know. We just need to hold them off long enough. Tunde let out a small laugh. You guys really like making things dramatic. Good news. I'm in. With a final click, the lock disengaged and the heavy door hissed open. The room inside was dimly lit, lined with complex monitoring systems, and at the center of it, slumped over in a secured chair, was Dr. Elijah. Kunle's breath caught in his throat. We found him. But just as he stepped forward, Mbeki's head lifted and his eyes widened with terror. No, you shouldn't have come. It's a trap. Alarms blared. The facility was going into lockdown. Kunle's blood turned cold. They had walked straight into it. The wailing of alarms sent a chill down Kunle's spine. Red emergency lights flashed across the steel walls, bathing the room in an ominous glow. Outside, the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. They were trapped. Mbeki struggled in his restraints, his breath coming in ragged gasps. You don't understand. They knew you were coming. This whole facility is a kill box. You have to leave me. Kunle shook his head. Not an option. We came for you and we're getting you out. Tunda was already at the console, fingers flying over the keyboard. I can override the lockdown. Buy us a few minutes at best, but we need an escape route. Amina moved to the door, peering out cautiously. We won't make it back the way we came. Too many guards. We need another exit. Dr. Okonkwo scanned the room before his gaze landed on an emergency vent near the ceiling. That might be our way out, but we have to move quickly. Ada grabbed Kunle's arm, her voice urgent. We need to lift Mbeki. He's weak. He won't make it up on his own. Kunle nodded and rushed to Mbeki's side, unfastening the restraints. The doctor winced as he tried to move, his legs trembling. I can walk, but not fast. Tunde's screen flashed red. Bad news. We've got company. Security is overriding my hack. They'll breach this room in less than 2 minutes. Amina climbed onto a desk and pried open the vent cover. Then we climb. Now! Kunle and Ada hoisted Mbeki up first, pushing him into the narrow space. Tunde followed, dragging his laptop behind him. Dr. Okonkwo scrambled in next, then Ada. Kunle was halfway in when the door behind them exploded inward. Armed guards stormed in, rifles raised. A burst of gunfire rang out. Kunle pulled himself into the vent just as bullets tore through the metal walls. Amina yanked him forward, their escape route barely holding as the gunfire echoed behind them. They were alive, for now. But the chase was far from over. Kunle crawled through the cramped air vent, his breaths shallow as he moved forward in the near darkness. The gunfire from below had stopped, but the echoes still rang in his ears. He could hear the guards shouting orders, spreading out to search for them. Amina led the way, her movements quick and precise. Behind Kun, Ada helped steady Dr. Mbeki, who was struggling to keep up. Tunde brought up the rear, his laptop clutched tightly against his chest. Where does this lead? Ada whispered urgently. There's a maintenance shaft just ahead, Amina responded. If we can reach it, we might be able to slip out through the emergency exit. Kanu's muscles ached as he pushed himself forward. The vent creaked beneath their weight, and every sound felt like an alarm giving away their location. He glanced back at Tunde, whose expression was tense. We have to move faster, Kunle muttered. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the tunnel. The vent behind them buckled. The guards had found their way in. They're cutting through, Tunde hissed. Amina cursed. We're almost there, just a few more meters. The team scrambled forward as fast as they could. Kunle to reach the maintenance shaft first and yanked open the grate. A metal ladder stretched downward into darkness. Go, now, he ordered. Amina slid down first, followed by Ada and Dr. Mbeki. Tunde hesitated just long enough to glance back. The vent behind them shuddered again. Then it burst open. A guard's arm reached through. Kunle didn't think. He kicked the arm back, sending the guard reeling. Then he grabbed Tunde's wrist and shoved him down the ladder. Just as he followed, a burst of gunfire ripped through the vent above him. He landed hard at the bottom, pain jolting up his legs. They were in a dimly lit maintenance corridor, old pipes lining the walls. Amina was already checking the exit. We're almost out, but we have to hurry. They'll be right behind us. Kunle pulled himself up, breathing heavily. Then, let's finish this. The chase wasn't over, but they were one step closer to freedom. The dimly lit maintenance corridor stretched ahead, damp and claustrophobic. Kunle's legs ached from the frantic escape, but he had no time to stop. Behind them, muffled shouts and hurried footsteps echoed from the shaft above. They're coming, Tunde whispered, gripping his laptop tighter. Amina checked the emergency exit door at the end of the corridor. This leads to the outer perimeter, she said. Once we're through, we'll be in open ground. We need a plan. Kunle turned to Dr. Mbeki. The man was exhausted, barely able to stand. Can you make it? Mbeki nodded weakly. I have to. If we don't stop them now, they'll never stop hunting us. Ada wiped sweat from her forehead. We need a distraction, something to slow them down. Tunde's eyes flickered with realization. I can trigger the facility's security breach alarm. It will force them to lock down the interior doors, buying us time. But it'll also alert them that we're near the exit. Kunle exhaled. Do it. We need every second we can get. Tundi knelt beside the control panel, fingers flying over the keyboard. Moments later, a mechanical klaxon blared through the halls. Emergency lights flashed as heavy security doors slammed shut behind them. That should give us a head start, Tunde said. But once they override it, they'll be on us. Kunle pushed open the exit door, revealing a wide-open loading dock. Beyond it, the dark expanse of the forest loomed. Their escape route. Move, he shouted, leading the charge. They sprinted across the open ground, their breaths ragged, the wind howled around them. But then, gunfire. A spotlight flared to life, sweeping across the dock. Armed guards stormed out from the far side, blocking their path. Kunle skidded to a stop, heart pounding. They had been waiting for them. Ada grabbed his arm. We can't go back. Amina's hands tightened into fists. We fight, it's the only way now. Kunle took a deep breath, adrenaline surging through his veins. This was it, the final stand. With a silent nod, he stepped forward. Then let's finish this. Kunle took a steadying breath, his fists clenched as the armed guards advanced. They were outnumbered, but he refused to let it end here, not when they had come this far. Tunde pressed a few keys on his laptop, then whispered urgently, I've activated the facility's override. All external communication is being broadcasted live. Everything happening here is being streamed. If they kill us now, the whole world will see. The guards hesitated, their earpieces crackling with frantic voices from their commanders. Colonel knew what this meant. A man in a dark suit stepped forward, his pistol raised. You don't understand what you're doing, Kunle. Walk away now and we might let you live. Kunle stared him down. You took my memories. You stole my life. You don't get to decide how this ends. Dr. Mbeki, though weak, lifted his head. Project Mnemosyne is over. The world knows now. No more secrets. The man's jaw tightened. You think exposing us will change anything? People forget. The world moves on. Kunle shook his head. Not this time. Suddenly, sirens blared from beyond the perimeter. The faint roar of helicopters grew louder. Reinforcements were coming, but not for Neurocorp. Tunde grinned. The government is responding to the breach. Too many eyes are on this now. They can't cover it up. The lead guard cursed under his breath. He and his men exchanged uncertain glances. Their power was slipping, and they knew it. Stand down, a voice boomed from behind them. It was a uniformed officer, flanked by a swarm of armed agents. Drop your weapons. This facility is under federal investigation. Neurocorp's men hesitated for only a second before realizing they had lost. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Kunle let out a shaky breath, barely believing it was over. Ada clutched his arm, her voice trembling. We did it. Kunle turned to Dr. Mbeki. Are you ready to tell the world everything? The doctor nodded. It's time. As dawn broke over the compound, Kunle felt the weight of his stolen past lifting. He may never recover all his memories, but he had reclaimed his future. The truth had won.